Download and upload more than ever before with an ultra-fast fiber connection. With 3 simple steps, you can be the one with an SLT fiber optic connection. Visit slt.lk.
Other Derana 24, sponsored by
Those who can see beyond tomorrow use BioClean.
Tonight, UNHRC concerns. UN expert insists consideration of human rights in fiscal assistance to Sri Lanka.
International financial institutions should not undermine the recipient state's ability to fulfill its human rights obligations.
Former US ambassador to the UN meanwhile lauds Minister Mangala Sambaravira for acknowledging human rights violations.
Mangala is well known for taking the fundamental step of recognizing past abuses and the critical need for reconciliation.
Region in peril. Pakistan extends India an olive branch amidst global concerns of a nuclear war. Come clean. Parliamentarians urge to declare their assets and liabilities.
Anyone who doesn't do it will then be looked upon with a little bit of suspicion. That's the whole idea of this exercise, I believe. Personal reasons. A Supreme Court justice recuses himself from hearing the FR petition filed by the former Navy commander. Tonight, Thursday, the 28th of February 2019.
From Other Derana, this is Other Derana First at 9 with Indivari Amuwata and Mahesh Jani. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
And a very good evening and welcome to First at 9 right here on Other Derana 24. Good evening, Indivari.
Good evening, Mahesh.
Lots of stories happening across the world. There are 3 main major stories from the world right now. 2 belongs to one single person, and the other is from our region.
Our region itself, as India-Pakistan tensions heighten. There are questions about a possibility of nuclear war, but I see that the Indian Premier and the Pakistani Prime Minister have come forward to make comments of this, although they're not on the same page. Yes. I think Narendra Modi backed his military, but then Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan is strongly for dialogue between these two countries. Indeed. And this, I think, is also a testing time for the Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan, cricketer turned politician.
Exactly, and the other thing that we have to look into, and actually we'll be reporting on that, is how exactly is this going to affect countries like Sri Lanka. Now, yesterday, Sri Lankan Airlines itself stopped flying to Pakistan because of this tension, which means, again, an airline that is down in the depths. It seems to be going a little bit more.
Certainly, I mean, with an ongoing crisis at home, trying to manage our finances in state-owned enterprises, I think the closure of the airspace in Pakistan, a frequent destination for Sri Lankan Airlines, is certainly going to hit the financial statements of Sri Lankan Airlines, I'm sure, during these couple of days. But we have another from the region again, from North Korea. Trump and North Korea, what's happening? This was supposed to be a historic second meeting, but Trump walks away from this meeting unexpectedly.
Mainly because the White House released a statement earlier today and said that apparently there was no agreement between the two countries. Initially, Kim Jong-un said that he's there thinking that he could denuclearize the region, but apparently there was no proper concrete agreement that would lead to some kind of peace in that region. But the other story is when Trump goes back home, he is going to heaps of trouble simply because of the testimony by his previous lawyer, Michael Cohen, who apparently gave so much of information about his dealings with Trump, and now he is against him. And apparently this could actually, yesterday I was watching the whole episode where he was giving the testimony to the Congress, and here he mentioned so much of information that I think would start, it would be the first step towards impeachment for Trump.
Certainly, I think for Trump, amid global tensions, Trump too will be facing a lot of tensions back at home. In local news, I think we have a few key stories that we'd like to talk about. The UNHRC, we see a report presented about Sri Lanka. Of course, on the 20th of next month, there will be a proposal on Sri Lanka that will be presented, while there are discussions and talks about Sri Lanka's co-sponsorship, especially opposition for the co-sponsorship, and request from the opposition for Sri Lanka to withdraw from our co-sponsorship of the Geneva resolution. There is more to report on, but we'd like to start off with our local news, of course, later on, but international news first, because we have a lot of regional and stories of global interest.
Well, let's take you straight to the Indian-Pakistan border, where amid concerns by many global powers over escalating tensions between these two countries, Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan today pledged to release a captured Indian pilot by tomorrow as a peace gesture. Now, both countries have ordered airstrikes over the last 2 days, the first time in history that two nuclear-armed powers have done so, while ground forces have exchanged fire in more than a dozen locations.
Well, as we said, Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan called for talks with India and hoped better sense would prevail so that both sides could de-escalate tensions. Although Indian External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj emphasized that India does not seek further escalation of the dispute, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who spoke for the first time since heightened tensions, reassured Indians that the entire country is standing with its soldiers.
India and Pakistan exchanged fire along their contested border in Kashmir yesterday, a day after Indian warplanes struck inside Pakistan for the first time since a war in 1971. Tensions have been elevated since a suicide car bombing by Pakistan-based militants in Indian-controlled Kashmir killed at least 40 Indian paramilitary police on the 14th of this month, but the risk of conflict rose dramatically on Tuesday when India launched an airstrike on what it said was a militant training base. In retaliation, Pakistan shot down 2 aircrafts yesterday with 1 pilot captured. Pakistan released what it said was a video of the detained pilot, Wing Commander Abhinandan, a move that India's foreign ministry called a vulgar display, an unprovoked act of aggression. After the February 14th attack, Indian Prime Minister Modi expressed deep anger and promised that those responsible would pay a heavy price. Addressing what was pitched as the world's largest video conference, Modi spoke again today for the first time since heightened tensions, saying India should unite with their soldiers. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi also called on the people of India to stand like a wall or a rock against terrorists who try to destabilize the country. Modi's comment on the escalating crisis along the border in disputed Kashmir is in stark contrast to Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan, who called for dialogue between the two sides. Khan warned that because India and Pakistan had nuclear weapons, the stakes were too high for any miscalculation in conflict. Imran Khan also pledged to return the captured pilot to India tomorrow as a gesture of peace. Meanwhile, Pakistan continued to have its airspace closed while India stepped up security in the northern part of the country, including at several airports. Schools within 5 kilometers along the de facto border in Kashmir, known as the Line of Control, were closed today. Many shops, petrol stations and businesses were also closed, with few people and vehicles on streets in sensitive areas, except for troop patrols. Along with United States, China and other major countries, Britain expressed deep concern about rising tensions between India and Pakistan.
Mr. Speaker, may I first say that the UK is deeply concerned about rising tensions between India and Pakistan and urgently calls for restraint on both sides to avoid further escalation. We're in regular contact with both countries, urging dialogue and diplomatic solutions to ensure regional stability. We're working closely with international partners, including through the UN Security Council, to de-escalate tensions and are monitoring developments closely and considering implications for British nationals.
During Russia-India-China trilateral meeting in Wuhan in eastern China, External Affairs Minister of India Sushma Swaraj also emphasized that global cooperation is needed to fight against militant attacks amidst fierce tensions between the two countries. US President Donald Trump meanwhile told of attractive news from Pakistan and India after his summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, saying, quote, "They have been going at it and we've been involved in trying to have them stop. And we have some reasonably decent news. Hopefully that's going to be coming to an end," unquote. Pakistan and India have fought 3 wars since independence from British colonial rule in 1947, 2 over the disputed Himalayan region of Kashmir, and went to the brink of 4th in 2002 after a Pakistani militant attack on India's parliament. India and Pakistan both control parts of Kashmir, but each claims the region in full.
Meanwhile, issuing a special statement today, Sri Lankan government requested India and Pakistan to act in a manner which ensures the security, peace and stability of the region. Now, the statement highlights the government's strong support for all endeavours towards the diffusion of tensions in this region, including the resolution of bilateral problems through dialogue and building confidence.
Now, the government also unequivocally condemned the recent terrorist attack in Pulwama and expressed a firm stance to fight against terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. Meanwhile, speaking to First at 9, international political analyst Mohan Samaranayake says that Sri Lanka too should use its influence to bring the regional situation under control.
Latest escalation can develop into a full-scale war. If that happens, it will be a threat to the world peace and security, and especially it will have far-reaching negative, disastrous consequences for the South Asian region. Therefore, now there are moves on the part of the powerful countries like the USA, Russia, and the United Nations to bring in peace and sanity between the two countries. Although Sri Lanka is a small country in the South Asian region, I am of the view that Sri Lanka can play a positive role and make a productive contribution to bring the situation under control. Sri Lanka is a friend of both these countries, India and Pakistan. India is our closest neighbor, and we have very strong political, economic and trade relations with India. On the other hand, Pakistan, since its inception, has been a firm, consistent and all-weather friend of Sri Lanka. During Sri Lanka's fight against terrorism, Pakistan stood firmly with us. Therefore, Sri Lanka has a duty and also can play a positive role to ease the situation on a procedure based on accepted principles of non-alignment.
More news from the region. The summit between US President Donald Trump and the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un ended unexpectedly with no agreement, although the pair was expected to announce progress on denuclearization. Now, both Trump and Kim were seen leaving the venue of their talks without even attending a planned lunch together.
Well, US President Donald Trump said the North Korean demands for sanctions relief could not be granted, and therefore the US side had to walk away from the talk. Speaking at a news conference after the summit in the Vietnamese capital of Hanoi, Trump said no plans had been made for a third summit.
US President Donald Trump said he had walked away from a nuclear deal at his summit with Kim Jong-un because of unacceptable demands from the North Korean leader to lift punishing US-led sanctions. The United Nations and the United States ratcheted up sanctions on North Korea when the reclusive state undertook a series of nuclear and ballistic missile tests in 2017, cutting off its main source's hard cash. The original White House program for the day had planned for a joint agreement signing ceremony as well as a working lunch for the two leaders, but expectations were abruptly dashed with the cancellation of both.
I've been saying very much from the beginning that speed is not that important to me. I very much appreciate no testing of nuclear, rockets, missiles, any of it. And Chairman Kim and I had a great talk about that last night. I'd let him say what he said if he'd like to, and if he doesn't have to. But We had a very good talk about that last night. And again, I am in no rush. We've developed something very special with respect to that. But I just want to say I have great respect for Chairman Kim, and I have great respect for his country, and I believe that it will be something economically that will be almost hard to compete with for many countries. It has such potential.
The Hanoi summit was Trump's second meeting with Kim since an inconclusive summit in Singapore in June that produced much fanfare but little substance, and there had been little sign of concrete progress since.
United Nations independent expert on foreign debt and human rights John Pablo today raised concerns about the impact of ongoing reforms on public spending and in some social sectors in Sri Lanka, now submitting reports to the Human Rights Council on his visit to Ukraine and Sri Lanka in 2018. Pablo said that the human rights impact assessment should be conducted systematically prior to the adoption of economic reforms in order to evaluate potential human rights risks and to avoid going backwards. The UN expert expressed these views in Geneva today during the ongoing 40th session of the UNHRC. The Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has set 20th of March as the day to discuss the report on Sri Lanka at the ongoing session. Sri Lanka was listed on the agenda for the 40th session after making a commitment to show progress on the issue of human rights by this March. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, or the Deputy High Commissioner, will submit a report on Sri Lanka during this session.
I would like to recall that international financial institutions, bilateral lenders and public donors should ensure that the terms of the transactions and their proposal for reform policies and conditionalities for financial support do not undermine the borrower's or the recipient's state ability to respect, protect and fulfill its human rights obligations. States, whether acting alone or within international financial institutions, as well as international financial institutions themselves, should not compel borrowing or receiving states to compromise satisfying their international human rights obligations or contribute to such compromise, either directly or indirectly. As a consequence, international financial institutions, bilateral lenders and other public donors, when granting a loan or giving policy advice in the context of economic reform measures, have an obligation to assess the human rights impact assessment of those measures.
Meanwhile, Minister Patali Champika Ranawaka is critical of Sri Lanka's co-sponsorship of the resolution brought against Sri Lankan by the United States, saying it is a serious political offence.
Media say that countries including Germany and Britain intend to present a resolution to extend the resolution on war crimes against Sri Lanka. It's been 10 years since the end of war. No conflict between Sinhala and Tamil communities were reported during these 10 years. Admiral Karannagoda and Admiral Ravindra Wijegunaratne have no direct connections to the missing 11 youths in Trincomalee. They are faced with accusations due to crimes committed by officials who worked under them. Our representatives should appear before the UNHRC and work towards achieving a practical process within the next 2 years. Members of the military and the LTT cadres arrested under the circumstances of war should be given amnesty. By co-sponsoring this resolution, the government has committed a serious political offence.
Well, a group of parliamentarians published their declarations of assets and liabilities today, making it the first time in Sri Lanka's political history that a group of MPs from multiple political parties came together to make this information public. Parliamentarians Tharaka Balasurya, Vasudeva Nanayakkara, M.A. Sumanthiran, Vidura Vikramanayaka and State Minister Iran Vikramaratne publicly declared their assets and liabilities at an event in Colombo today.
Transparency International Sri Lanka organised an event in Colombo today where a group of parliamentarians across several political parties came together to declare their assets and liabilities. The international organisation initiated the effort in an attempt to highlight the need for an open parliament and a strong democracy within Sri Lanka.
Although this responsibility that we have is to declare, that doesn't happen because all that we are required to do is to make the declaration and give the document over to a particular authority, and then although any member of the public is entitled to pay a small fee and get a copy of that declaration, they are prohibited from making it public. In fact, it's a punishable offense if they made another's declaration public, and that is why we have waived that right that we have under the law today, and we are making it public so that any further public dissemination of this document cannot be construed as an offense or a violation of that law. In this country, no politician has been convicted, as far as I know, of the offense of corruption. Have previously one or two, yeah, very few. I think in some election petitions or so there might have been. So that's negligible, and that must change. And hopefully during this year, after 30th June, when this year's declaration becomes due, more MPs will voluntarily take this step. There will be some pressure brought on all the MPs to voluntarily do this, and anyone who doesn't do it will then be looked upon with a little bit of suspicion. That's the whole idea of this exercise, I believe.
Leader of the opposition Mahinda Rajapaksa cast doubt over holding the much-delayed provincial council elections this year. Now addressing a media in Alpitia today, the opposition leader also questioned the government's lack of interest in granting people the right to vote.
Leader of the opposition Mahinda Rajapaksa addressed media after paying his last respects to the remains of Southern Provincial Council member Tamali Vitanachi in Nara Novita in Alpitia.
This government doesn't talk about their own corruption, they talk only about others. Even the president questions what can be expected from a government that is full of thieves. The presidential election will definitely be held this year, but we have doubts about the other elections.
And we'll return with more local news after this short break. Do stay with us on First.
You are watching Sri Lanka's #1 news channel. This is Other Derana 24.
Former U.S. Ambassador to Sri Lanka or the United Nations, Samantha Power, today praised Minister Mangala Samaraweera for acknowledging human rights violations. Well, Samantha Power was the keynote speaker at a celebration of Minister Mangala Samaraweera's 3-decade-long political career. The event, held at the BMICH this evening, was also attended by President Maithripala Sirisena, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe and other leading political figures.
An event to celebrate 30 years of Minister Mangala Samaraweera's political life was held at the BMICH this evening under the patronage of President Maithripala Sirisena and Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe.
I should specifically say that Mangala is a man with a good heart. He is someone who dedicated himself for democracy and reconciliation. We all respect Mangala for it. He is a skillful man, and the country needs your skills, knowledge, intelligence and maturity for the future even more than for the past 30 years. When Mangala Samaraweera started his political career, he was in the opposition. He was a pioneer in my criticism those days. He worked according to his own fundamentals, according to which he joined us at the UNP. He is to present a new budget as the Minister of Finance in the near future. I think this is why he decided to hold this event before the budget, because now he gets all the praise. I don't know what will happen after the 5th though.
Actually, it is to President Sirisena's credit that he trimmed many of his executive powers down himself. And during the last 4 years, Sri Lanka has restored, as a result, its democratic credentials, established the rule of law, and elevated the reconciliation process to become the topmost priority. Despite setbacks from time to time, Sri Lanka continues to build a new future for her people based on the fundamentals of democracy, reconciliation and development. After 30 years in Parliament, I would be lying if I say that I have no regrets and disappointments.
Mangala is well known for taking the fundamental step of recognizing past abuses and of recognizing the critical need for reconciliation. As Foreign Minister, he spearheaded the creation of the Office of Missing Persons, which is now finally operational. He helped push a law through Parliament that will provide reparations for war victims and survivors. He secured the launching of the first ever U.S.-Sri Lankan strategic dialogue, and he spearheaded Sri Lanka's application to the Millennium Challenge Corporation through a long and tortured approval process.
Iranian ambassador to Sri Lanka, Mohammad Zairi Amrani, reveals that Iran has not incurred any losses due to the temporary halt of the Ummah Oil multipurpose project funded by his government. The Iranian ambassador to Sri Lanka expressed these views when he called on opposition leader Mahinda Rajapaksa at his official residence in Colombo yesterday. The ambassador had also invited the opposition leader to join him in an observational tour at the project site. Meanwhile, opposition leader Mahinda Rajapaksa has told the Iranian ambassador that he has requested the present government to not suspend the development projects launched during his administration. However, these requests were not heeded. The Iranian ambassador had further noted that it is following sanctions by the United States that Sri Lanka decided to halt oil imports from Iran. He had, however, pointed out that several other Asian countries, including India, still purchase oil from Iran despite these sanctions. The Iranian ambassador had also suggested that introduction of a system where Sri Lankan tea, rubber and spices could be exchanged for Iranian oil, through which the countries could benefit.
Also in one of our top stories, the Supreme Court postponed the deliberation of the fundamental rights petition filed by former Navy Commander Admiral Vasantha Karanagoda until the 7th of March. The petition sought an order preventing the Criminal Investigations Department from arresting Admiral Karanagoda. Now, the petition's hearing was postponed when it was taken up today before a 3-member judge bench comprising of Chief Justice Nalin Pereira as well as Justices Priyantha Jayawardena and Muthu Fernando. Justice Priyantha Jayawardena, however, informed court that he no longer wishes to be involved in the case, citing personal reasons.
Police fired tear gas and water cannons to disperse hundreds of teachers who conducted a protest near the Ministry of Education in Isirupaya today. The demonstrations resulted in heavy traffic congestion along the Borella-Kottaba main road. Protesting teachers and principals demanded that the failure to resolve salary anomalies, which stretched across 22 years, be addressed. They also voiced their displeasure over the failure to protect teachers who uphold students' discipline as well as assignments of other duties which impede teaching process.
Well, the United National Party points out that the President, Maithripala Sirisena, is now in a position to carry out proper investigations into alleged assassination plot, as the Ministry of Law and Order is under his purview. Now, the UNP parliamentarian Mujibur Rahman said this, addressing a media briefing in Colombo today. He also speaking to media following an event today, Minister of Plantation Industries Navin Dasanayake gave insight into the latest from the report compiled by the committee appointed to probe alleged cocaine usage of UNP parliamentarians.
They criticized the Attorney General's department, questioning the appointment of the Attorney General. They also claim that those appointed to the Supreme Court were not recommended by the President. The Attorney General is also accused of not considering seniority when appointing members to the Supreme Court. Proceedings of the Constitutional Council are also questioned. With all these, we could understand that they are targeting two institutions, the Attorney General's department, which files legal action against misconduct during their regime, and second, secondly, the judiciary, which takes legal action against them. We have appointed only those who were recommended by the president. The president recently talked about his assassination plot. The Indian national who was arrested in this regard has been released. Although the president said that he will reveal details of this within 2 weeks, he has failed to reveal anything even after 2 months. Since the Minister of Law and Order is now under the president, he can conduct a proper investigation with full transparency and reveal those who are connected to this.
In the meantime, following an event in Colombo, Minister Navin Dissanayake responded to questions raised by the media regarding the committee appointed to probe cocaine consumption among UNP ministers.
Our leader has the report compiled by the committee. The report clearly says that State Minister Ranjan Ramanayake has no legal evidence to reveal a name of anyone who he says consumes cocaine.
And we take a short commercial break on First at 9. We'll return with more.
You are watching Sri Lanka's #1 news channel. This is Other Derana 24.
Welcome back. Taking you to business news very quickly. Sri Lankan shares rose after declining for 8 straight sessions to a 4-month closing low in the previous day as investors picked up beaten down stocks ahead of an increase in liquidity. Now the benchmark all share price index closed 0.28% higher at 5,816.29, edging up from its lowest close since October 25th, which was hit yesterday. We have Dimantha Matthew from First Capital Holdings for a brief report on today's market performance.
The statutory reserve ratio cut is positively affecting the market, with some buying interest triggering in the bond and stock markets. The SRR cut by the central bank is releasing some liquidity into the market tomorrow, triggering the positive sentiment. The bond market saw buying interest by local and foreign parties, but yields broadly remained flat for the day.
The Sri Lankan rupee closed weaker as analysts said investors waited for directions from next week's budget and the outcome of talks between government authorities and the IMF. The rupee fell 0.61% to 179 rupees and 95 cents per dollar today compared with yesterday's close. Now here's a look at today's foreign exchange rates.
In sports, we take you to tennis. Well, Roger Federer claimed his 50th win at the Dubai Finals Tennis Championship by beating Spain's Fernando Verdasco in 3 sets to reach the quarterfinals. Federer moves a step closer to his 100th ATP Finals singles title with yesterday's 6-3, 3-6, 6-3 victory. The 20-time Grand Slam winner will face Hungarian world number 35 Martin Fucsovics for a place in the last 4.
A bit of cricket. Australia chased down 190 runs to defeat India in the second T20 International and clinched the 2-match 2020 series. India put 190 runs for 4 wickets on the board in their allotted 20 overs, with Virat Kohli hitting 72 of 38 deliveries. Coming in at number 4, Glenn Maxwell smashed 113 of 55 balls as Australia hammered India by 7 wickets with 2 balls to spare. Maxwell's unbeaten knock had 9 sixes and 7 fours. The two teams will now contest a 5-match one-day series which begins in Hyderabad on Saturday.
Well, that wraps up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining in. If you did miss any of our stories, and for all the stories that keep developing, log on to www.othertherana.lk, or you can also follow us on our social media sites, YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. I'm Indivariya Muwata.
And I'm Mahesh Johnny. Have a good night.